Hey YouTube, it's Kel. How are you? I hope this video finds you well. I wanted to pop on tonight. We're going to do a kind of introductory video to a series that I want to do on manipulation tactics. And I feel like this is important to do because there are a lot of really good, innocent, very pure-hearted people out there who would never think to manipulate someone or do some of the things that we're going to talk about in this series of videos. But I feel like it's important because if you are not aware of some of these manipulation tactics, then you can obviously be a victim of manipulation tactics, right? It's kind of like walking into a car dealership, and if you're not on guard that they try to sell you in certain ways or whatever, then you could be susceptible to it, right? So, and how would you learn some of these manipulation tactics unless they are taught, unless you are informed about them or educated about them? And one of the biggest ones I want to start with tonight is one called flipping the blame, or it's also called shifting the blame. So they're the same thing, but it's important to know about because if you are a kind, loving, honest, authentic, peace-loving person, you may be susceptible to this one. And so what happens here, and I'm going to use, like, in this series of videos, I'm going to use what I would call like person X and person Y, because hopefully it can help you kind of keep any hypothetical dialogue clear in your mind with a conversation going on between two different people. But an example of flipping the blame could be something like this. Okay, so person X gets their feelings hurt about, I don't know, person Y I have not thought about this in advance, by the way, everybody, but could get their feelings hurt about person Y coming home an hour late without texting. Okay, so let's just say person X is pretty kind of innocent and pure-hearted and healthy, even. And so person X, sits person Y down and says, hey, when you came home an hour late without texting me, I felt disrespected and it hurt my feelings. I got upset about it, kind of made me mad. So let's just, say that that's the essence, in a sense of, in the future, could you text me if you're going to be late? Okay. So that's like the essence of what person X says. Well, person Y, in a normal, healthy conversation would be like, yeah, I totally get it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. I'll definitely try to text you next time. And it wasn't on purpose. I love you, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So that's healthy person Y. Now, psychological manipulation tactic, using the tactic flipping the blame or shifting the blame, would basically not be able to hold space for person X's feelings, and person Y would jump into how selfish it is of person X to think the world should revolve around them, that they're entitled to a text, and if they're going to be late. So basically what happens here is that person X started off as the one upset, but when you're using the tactic flipping the blame, you basically don't allow person X to have their feelings of anger. And person Y, instead, what they do is they manufacture something to be more mad about. So it's like they end up, quote, more mad about a diversion tactic or a diversion topic than person X. Okay, so they might say, like, you're so selfish. I've had the worst day. How could you expect me to text you? And like, that is just the most, self-absorbed thing I've ever heard. And again, this is totally just an example of flipping the blame. And so what happens essentially, right, is that as person X is trying to stay on this topic over here of the initial not getting a text and, hey, can you just let me know? Person Y has now shifted both the blame. It's now saying that in this whole argument, person X is to blame because originally they thought that, person Y may have thought that person X was blaming them. So now they're trying to shift it to how somehow it's actually person X's fault that person Y didn't text for like and was like an hour late without texting. Okay. So it's shifting the blame, and it's shifting the anger. Like basically I'm going to be more mad and you're going to be more to blame. And I won't even I won't validate, your initial feelings. I won't take accountability. I won't say sorry. I won't, do all those kinds of things. So this is a classic manipulation tactic. We're going to get into other ones like gaslighting and things like that later, but this is just the first one. But one of the reasons why there's a few reasons why person Y may do this. Number one is narcissism, but I hate using that word, to be honest, like lately, because it seems like that label narcissist has been, to me, overused by lots of people who really don't know what they're talking about. I mean, it definitely can be true, but true narcissists, are not as common as they've been, made to be in society today. Now, you can have people with narcissistic traits, and that is different than like a true narcissist. And one of a narcissist's traits is being defensive. And why they are defensive is typically they are protecting their own image. Now, they could be protecting it to other people. They also could be protecting it to themselves. Like they have not integrated the imperfect sides of themselves with themselves to accept themselves. So instead, because here's the thing, a lot of narcissists may think I have to either be this magnificent, amazing human, or I'm the worst ever and I feel shame and blame, and I'm not going to allow myself to go there. So I'm going to stay up here. Okay. Like at perfect. And that means it's always everybody else's fault for things. Okay. So, and it really touches on what in psychology we call a narcissistic shame, or a narcissistic insecurity, or a narcissistic wound. Those are all the same things, where it's like basically anything that could make them feel insecure, where they don't feel one up on people, because they're used to feel, they're usually very smart, and they can a lot of times feel one up on people. And so now we're going to get into, so person Y might not be a narcissist. They might just be insecure. And when people are insecure, they have a hard time taking ownership and accountability for things, because it touches on that deep root of, I feel unlovable, I feel defective, I feel like I can't make mistakes because I need to be good enough so that someone will love me, right? So that's like another, just insecurity is another, that person Y may not have said, hey, to themselves, hey, it's okay that I have mistakes, it's okay that I have imperfections. Someone is still going to love me with all of that, and therefore I can admit those imperfections, and I can admit those mistakes when I make them, and I can take accountability, and I can say sorry, and I can say, yeah, I screwed up there, you're right. But it doesn't make them a bad, horrible person. It just means that they did something that was less than ideal, right? So, also, the last reason why person Y may use this flipping the blame tactic, or the shifting the blame tactic, or the shifting, we'll get into shifting the anger, but it's kind of the same thing, is control, like control issues. So if, anger is a very, kind of high control feeling. If you feel powerless, a lot of times people are going to want to get powerful. And so they become angry because it'll make them feel more powerful in the moment than admitting powerlessness, vulnerability, feeling, instead of like, so anger can sometimes keep you in that one up. When I say one up, I mean, there's a dynamic of, and maybe I'll do another video on this another time, but one up versus one down. I will. But so some people like to stay in a one up kind of, I'm better than you, and I'll make sure that you constantly know that dynamic. Okay. So, and that has a lot to do with control, right? Because if you meet someone on an equal playing field, or even if you let yourself admit your vulnerabilities, you can be seen as like a one down position, and that is a vulnerable position. Actually, the more psychology you do, the more you realize that a lot of times the people who are able to be the most vulnerable easily are actually the ones who have the truest control. But that's a whole different topic. So, but typically people feel like if they have issues with being vulnerable, they're going to maintain this like bravado, this need for like control over the argument, control over the narrative, control over who is at fault. So I'll blame you before you blame me. I'll leave you before you leave me. So there can definitely be like a control issue. So if there is person Y, if they are shifting the blame or flipping the blame, those can be some reasons why they are doing it. They deep down may feel very scared about feeling powerless, feeling vulnerable, feeling like they could be hurt by someone, things like that. So, or just admitting their own imperfections, their own, weaknesses, because they might not feel lovable enough. They might not feel good enough deep down. They might not feel secure, and they might not accept those things within themselves. So there's a whole bunch of different, obviously this is just generalities, but it's a whole bunch of different reasons why someone may take that shifting the blame or flipping the blame, stance. Now, one last thing I'm going to say on this is if this sounds familiar to you at all, and especially if you are person X, you want to work on not letting someone else's anger or their narrative shift from and take away that your feelings are valued. So you can, in that situation, if you are person X, you can say, hey, I want to hear if you truly have an issue with whatever you're bringing up right now. I'm happy to talk about it. We can talk about it another time, because when I started this conversation, I was feeling this way about this. I was feeling hurt because you didn't come home on time. And so I want to talk about that. I'm allowed to have my feelings, and I would appreciate it if you could listen to them and validate them. And then later on, if you think that I'm selfish or you want to talk about something else that is bothering you, we can talk about that. But let's first just finish talking about the issue at hand that I brought up, because I'm not going to let you shift the topic to you being upset. Because what happens is often person X doesn't want someone mad at them, so they go into like people pleasing mode, and they're scared of rejection, so they'll just be like, so all of a sudden they kind of allow the topic to shift off of their feelings. And worse than that, sometimes person Y will stay so mad and hold like anger as resentment until person X, who was originally the one who started off mad and hurt, ends up coming around and apologizing to person Y, because person Y kind of outlasted everybody when it came to how mad they were, right? So, and that is a classic example of shifting the blame. And I would say to person X, don't do that. Do not apologize when you started off as being the hurt one. You can apologize for things later in a different conversation if your partner has problems, right? But it shouldn't be about who's gonna and you can even apologize in the conversation if your partner is taking accountability. But if they're not, and they're just trying to blame you and have the bigger blame be on you, and the more anger, them being more angry so they can kind of out anger you, then you don't want to positively reinforce that by apologizing. Okay, so, and again, I'm all for apologies. We'll get into another video about that later. But if you just apologize, you're kind of people pleasing, you're essentially abandoning yourself, so you're basically saying that their feelings are more important than yours. And I hope everybody can see how that's abandoning yourself, and especially if you just kind of forget about what the original topic was. Okay, so I would recommend to person X, your growth area is to not let their anger get you off topic, and to not let them get away without taking accountability. And definitely do not go into people-pleasing / apologizing mode just because they're angry and they could be manipulating you with their anger. Okay, so that's what I would say to person X. That is their growth area. If any of this sounds familiar, person Y, their growth is going to be getting more secure with, not having to be one up all the time, being more like, fine, we both have weaknesses, we're both lovable. And so therefore, person Y should also work on taking more accountability, taking responsibility for their actions, and in that moment, holding space for the other person's feelings and letting them be upset without trying to kind of out anger them or out upset them or out blame them or whatever. So it's really working on, taking accountability, owning certain parts in yourself that are imperfect and saying it's okay that I'm imperfect. We're all imperfect. We all deserve love anyways as imperfect human beings. And really learning how to hold more space for your partner. That would be person-wise kind of growth area. So in the future, I'll be talking about other ones like gaslighting and just other things that have come up. But it's important that we talk about these things, because if people don't educate themselves, thank God, like in Google times, a lot of people are finding out more about these kinds of tactics that we never knew about before. But it's just important, like, I feel like, to have these kinds of videos where you actually get educated on them, so you do not fall victim to them, so that you don't abandon yourself in when you were hurt or when you have, upset feelings. You don't just go into like people pleasing your partner. Like another one that we'll talk about in the future is like if someone withholds love or withholds affection or neglects you. So like we'll definitely get into it, but a lot of these can be manipulation tactics. And so hopefully you'll get from these videos just different areas that both partners can work on growing in if you want a healthier relationship. So until then, I just want to pop on and give you this little 2 cents from my 20 years of psychology experience, and that I hope this video finds you happy and healthy, and I will see you next time.